Amy Rodriguez pressed her face against the small window of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger. Nexus Prime looked like a metal city floating in the darkness of space. Bright lights blinked along its surface, and ships moved around it like tiny insects. She had never seen anything so big in her life. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked the pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. His voice came through the speaker with a strange accent. "Yes, sir," Amy replied. Her stomach felt tight with nervousness. She had dreamed of this moment for 3 years, ever since she scored high enough on the test to be accepted. Only 12 humans had ever been chosen for the Galactic Defense Academy. She was going to be the 13th. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Amy grabbed her single bag and followed the pilot through the airlock. The station's gravity felt different from Earth's, lighter somehow. She had to concentrate to walk normally. The arrival area was huge and filled with beings she had only seen in videos. Tall, gray creatures with long necks stood next to short, furry aliens with big eyes. Some looked almost human, while others seemed impossible. They all wore the same dark blue uniforms with silver badges. "Cadet Rodriguez?" A voice called her name. Amy turned to see a creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. It stood 7 feet tall with golden feathers covering its arms and neck. Its eyes were completely black. "Yes, sir," Amy said, trying not to stare. "I am Commander Zekthara. Welcome to Nexus Prime." The commander's voice was sharp and cold. "Follow me. Orientation begins in 30 minutes. Amy walked behind the commander through long hallways filled with cadets. They all stopped talking when they saw her. Some pointed and whispered to each other. She heard the word DeathworlderCadetThreeTimes several times, though she pretended not to notice. The commander led her to a large room with rows of seats. About 200 cadets sat waiting. Amy found an empty seat near the back and sat down. The alien next to her, a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal, moved slightly away. "Do not worry," the crystal being said in a voice like wind chimes. "I am Carousel of the Ethereal Collective." "You are the human, yes?" "Amy Rodriguez," she said, grateful that someone was being friendly. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure is mine. I have never met a Deathworlder before." Carasol's crystalline face seemed to smile. "Tell me, is it true that your planet tries to kill you every day?" Before Amy could answer, another voice spoke up. "Hey, another human." A young man with sandy hair and green eyes slid into the seat next to Amy. "Jake Thompson from New York. Man, am I glad to see you. I've been here 2 weeks, and I was starting to think I was the only one." Amy smiled for the first time since arriving. "Amy Rodriguez from Texas. How have you been doing here?" Jake's expression became serious. "It's tough. The other cadets don't trust us. They think we're too violent, too unpredictable. And the training ... He shook his head. "It's all about control and precision. Everything we do feels wrong to them." Before Amy could respond, Commander Zekthara stepped onto the platform at the front of the room. The talking stopped immediately. "Cadets," the commander began, "you represent the finest young beings from across the galaxy. You come from 15 different species, each with unique abilities and perspectives. Over the next year, you will learn to work together as one unit." The commander's black eyes swept across the room and stopped on Amy. "However, some of you come from what we call death worlds. Planets where survival requires constant violence and aggression. While we respect the strength this brings, you must understand that such behavior has no place in civilized galactic society." Amy felt her face grow hot. Every cadet in the room was looking at her and Jake. She wanted to stand up and argue, but Jake grabbed her arm and shook his head slightly. "The Academy has strict protocols," Commander Zekthara continued. "Restraint and precision are valued above all else. Those who cannot adapt to our ways will be removed from the program." The commander's eyes stayed on Amy as he spoke these words. After orientation, the cadets were divided into groups for their first combat simulation. Amy found herself in a squad with Carousel, Jake, and 2 other aliens. Their squad leader was a tall, silver-skinned being with purple eyes named Veltar. I am from Zentaurus Prime, Veltar announced proudly. My people have been part of the galactic community for over 1,000 years. We understand proper military conduct. He looked directly at Amy and Jake. Some of you will need to learn to control your primitive instincts. The simulation took place in a large room with walls that could change shape and create different environments. Today it looked like a city street with buildings on both sides. Holographic enemies would appear, and the cadets had to work together to defeat them. Remember, Veltar said as they took their positions, we move as one unit. Number. Individual actions. Follow my commands exactly. The simulation began. Enemy soldiers appeared from behind buildings and started shooting energy beams at the squad. Veltar gave commands in a calm, measured voice. Advance 3 meters. Take cover behind the blue barrier. Kirasol, provide covering fire. Amy watched. A tactical display on her helmet screen. She could see a perfect flanking route that would let them surprise the enemy from behind. It would be quick and effective. She started to move toward it. Rodriguez, return to formation, Veltar ordered sharply. Amy stopped. The flanking route was still there, still perfect. But she returned to her position behind the barrier. The squad continued to advance slowly, exactly as Veltar commanded. They won the simulation, but it took 20 minutes longer than it should have after the exercise. Veltar addressed the squad. Acceptable performance. However, Cadet Rodriguez, your movement toward the enemy flank was unauthorized. Such reckless behavior could have compromised the entire mission. But sir, Amy said, I saw an opportunity to end the fight quickly. You saw nothing, Veltar replied coldly. You acted on instinct like an animal. This is precisely why Deathworlders struggle with proper military training. You cannot think beyond violence. Jake stepped forward. With respect, sir, Amy was trying to help the squad succeed. I do not need advice from another primitive, Veltar said. Both of you will report for extra training sessions. Perhaps repetition will help you understand the importance of following orders. That night, Amy lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. The room she shared with Kirasol was small but comfortable. Through the window she could see the stars and the curve of a nearby planet. You are troubled, Kirasol observed. Her crystalline form glowed softly in the darkness. They already decided we don't belong here, Amy said. No matter what we do, they'll see us as violent animals. Perhaps, Kirasol replied thoughtfully, but I have studied your species. Humans are survivors. You do not give up easily. This is not a weakness, despite what others may think. Amy turned to look at her roommate. What do you mean? My people live on a world of perfect harmony. We have never known war or violence. But we have also never known the strength that comes from overcoming great challenges. Kirasol's voice was gentle. You carry something inside you that the rest of us lack. Perhaps that is why you are truly here. Amy closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself. She thought about her home on Earth, where storms and earthquakes were common, where humans had learned to survive in the harshest conditions. Maybe Kirasol was right. Maybe being from a death world wasn't something to be ashamed of. Outside her window, the stars continued to shine in the endless darkness of space. 3 weeks had passed since Amy arrived at the academy. She had learned to walk properly in the station's gravity and memorized the layout of the endless corridors. Her test scores were excellent, but the other cadets still watched her with suspicious eyes. Every morning began the same way. Amy woke before dawn for physical training while Kirasol meditated in the corner. The crystal being needed very little sleep and spent most nights in quiet contemplation. Amy found her presence comforting in the sterile room. Good morning, Amy, Kirasol said as Amy pulled on her training uniform. You seem tense today. Live fire exercise, Amy replied. First time we'll be using real weapons instead of training simulators. Kirasol's crystalline face showed concern. Are you worried about the danger? Amy laughed. No, I'm worried about following orders when people might get hurt. The training facility was larger than the simulation room with metal walls and obstacles. that could be moved to create different scenarios. Real weapons were locked in cases along one wall. Amy had never seen alien energy weapons before. Only pictures and training manuals. Commander Zekthara stood before the assembled cadets. Today you will face live combat scenarios. The weapons are set to low power, but they can still cause serious injury. Follow all safety protocols. Obey your squad leaders without question. Any cadet who endangers others will be immediately removed from the program. Amy noticed how the commander's eyes lingered on her and Jake. The message was clear. The cadets were divided into their usual squads. Amy found herself with Veltar, Karasol, Jake, and a new member named Kixron. Kixron was a small, quick alien with gray skin and large yellow eyes. He spoke little but watched everything carefully. Listen carefully, Veltar said as they approached. The weapons cases. We will advance through the course slowly and methodically. Each obstacle must be cleared before we move to the next. No heroics. No individual initiative. We succeed as a unit or we fail as a unit. Amy picked up her weapon. It was lighter than she expected, with a smooth metal surface that felt warm in her hands. The energy cell glowed blue through a small window near the trigger. The targets are automated defense systems, Veltar explained. They will fire on us with training rounds that sting but do not cause permanent damage. Our weapons will disable them with direct hits. Remember, accuracy over speed. The course began in what looked like a warehouse filled with boxes and metal. Barriers, red lights flashed to signal the start of the exercise. Immediately, the automated systems began firing bright orange beams at the squad. Take cover behind the first barrier, Veltar ordered. Kirasol, provide covering fire from the left. Kixron, watch our right flank. Amy crouched behind a metal box as energy beams flew overhead. She could see 3 defense systems positioned around the room. One was poorly positioned and could be easily flanked from the right side. She started to move toward it. Rodriguez, maintain position, Veltar commanded without looking at her. Amy stopped. The defense system continued to fire at their position, keeping them pinned down. She watched Veltar's tactical display and saw him planning a slow, careful advance that would take 10 minutes to complete. Squad leader, Amy said, I can disable the right side turret from its blind spot. Negative, we follow protocol. Amy bit her tongue and stayed in position. They advanced exactly as Veltar planned, moving from cover to cover in perfect formation. It worked, but Amy could have disabled all 3 systems in half the time. After completing the first room, they moved to the second area. This one was designed to look like a space station corridor with multiple levels and narrow passages. The automated systems were more sophisticated here, with better sensors and faster targeting. Same approach, Veltar said, slow and steady. But as they moved into the corridor, something went wrong. The automated systems began firing much faster than before. Instead of the orange training beams, they were shooting bright white energy that left scorch marks on the walls. The weapons are malfunctioning, Kixron shouted over the sound of weapons fire. Those are not training rounds, Veltar's calm demeanor cracked. Impossible. The safety protocols, a white beam passed inches from Jake's head and burned a hole in the wall behind him. The smell of melted metal filled the air. We need to retreat, Veltar ordered. But when they turned back toward the entrance, more defense systems had activated behind them. They were trapped in the corridor with lethal weapons firing from both directions. Emergency shutdown, Veltar called into his communicator. Exercise termination, authorization code 77 Alpha. Nothing happened. The weapons continued to fire, forcing the squad to press against the walls for minimal cover. Kirasol's crystalline form began to crack under the stress. I cannot maintain this position much longer. The energy disrupts my molecular structure. Jake was pressed against the opposite wall, his face pale with fear. The manual override, he shouted. Someone has to reach the control panel at the far end of the corridor. Amy looked down the corridor. The control panel was 50 meters away, past 6 automated weapons platforms. The corridor was narrow with very little cover. Anyone trying to reach it would be exposed to constant fire. No one can make that run, Veltar said, his voice shaking. We wait for rescue. But Amy could see that rescue might not come in time. Kirasol was already showing signs of serious damage, and the walls around them were beginning to weaken from the constant weapons fire. I can make it, Amy said. Absolutely not, Veltar replied. That is a direct order. You will maintain position. Amy looked at her squadmates. Jake was trying to comfort Kirasol, whose glow was becoming dimmer. Kixron was attempting to return fire, but his shots were ineffective against the heavily shielded defense systems. Rodriguez, did you hear me? Veltar demanded. Amy heard him. She also heard the sound of Kirasol's crystal structure beginning to crack under the energy bombardment. She thought about her friend's gentle voice and kind words during the lonely nights at the academy. I'm sorry, Amy said, and then she ran. The corridor erupted in weapons fire as Amy sprinted toward the control panel. Energy beams seared the air around her, missing by inches. Her human reflexes, trained by a lifetime on a dangerous world, guided her movements. She dove, rolled, and jumped with a speed that surprised even her. Behind her, she heard Veltar screaming orders for her to return. She ignored him. A beam grazed her shoulder, burning through her uniform and leaving a painful mark on her skin. She kept running. Another beam missed her head by millimeters, so close she could feel the heat on her face. The control panel was just ahead. Amy dove behind a small metal barrier and reached for the emergency shutdown switch. As her hand touched the control, a final beam struck her in the leg. Pain shot through her body, but she managed to flip the switch. The weapons fire stopped immediately. The corridor fell silent except for the sound of cooling metal and Amy's heavy breathing. Rodriguez! Veltar's voice echoed off the walls. What have you done? Amy limped back toward her squad. The burn on her leg made walking difficult, but she was alive. More importantly, so were her squadmates. I saved our lives, Amy said simply. You violated direct orders, Veltar replied, his purple eyes blazing with anger. You put the entire squad at risk with your reckless actions. How did I put them at risk? Amy asked. I stopped the weapons from firing. You could have been killed. Then we would have been down a squad member. Amy stared at him. So you would rather let Kirasol die than risk losing me? Veltar had no answer for that. Jake helped Amy walk back to the entrance where medical personnel were waiting. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I'm fine, Amy said, though her leg throbbed with pain. Is Kirasol all right? She will recover, Jake said. But Amy, you really screwed up. They're going to come down hard on you for this. Amy looked back at the corridor, at the scorch marks on the walls where lethal weapons had been firing at her friends. I know, she said, but I'd do it again. Commander Zekthara was waiting for them at the medical station. His feathered face showed no emotion as he watched the medical team treat Amy's wounds. Cadet Rodriguez, he said in his cold voice. Report to my office immediately after medical clearance. Amy nodded. She knew what was coming. But as she looked at Kirasol's grateful expression and Jake's worried face, she felt no regret. Sometimes saving lives was more important than following orders, even if no one else understood that. Commander Zekdar's office was cold and empty except for a metal desk and 2 chairs. Awards from different alien governments hung on the walls, and a large window showed the stars beyond the station. Amy stood at attention while the commander read from a datapad. Cadet Rodriguez, he began, your actions during the live fire exercise violated 3 separate Academy regulations, disobeying direct orders, abandoning assigned position, endangering fellow cadets through reckless behavior. Amy kept her eyes forward. Sir, I was trying to save my squadmates. You were following your primitive instincts? Commander Zekthara replied sharply. This is exactly what we expected from a Deathworlder. Your species cannot control its violent impulses. With respect, sir, there was nothing violent about stopping weapons from firing. The commander's black eyes narrowed. Do not argue with me, cadet. You will spend the next week in detention. Any further violations will result in immediate expulsion from the academy. Amy felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Yes, sir. Dismissed. Amy left the office and found Jake waiting in the corridor. His face was worried as he walked beside her toward their quarters. How bad was it? He asked. A week of detention. But Jake, he's looking for any excuse to kick me out. I can see it in his eyes. Then keep your head down. Don't give him that excuse. But keeping her head down proved difficult. 2 months had passed since the live fire incident, and Amy had thrown herself into her studies. Her test scores were among the highest in the class, and she had mastered every piece of equipment they used. Yet the other cadets still treated her like a dangerous animal during tactical planning exercises. Her ideas were ignored even when they were clearly better than the alternatives. In combat simulations, she was always assigned the most basic roles. When she tried to suggest improvements, she was told that Deathworlders could not understand sophisticated strategy. The worst part was watching her friends suffer because of their association with her. Carousel was excluded from study groups. Jake was passed over for advanced training opportunities. Even Kixron, who had barely spoken to her, was treated with suspicion because he had been in her squad. This is not fair to you, Amy told Carousel. One evening as they sat in their room, you should distance yourself from me. Carasol's crystalline form glowed softly in the dim light. Do you think I'm weak? What? No, of course not. Then do not insult me by suggesting I would abandon a friend to gain approval from fools. Amy smiled despite her troubles. Thank you. Besides, Carousel added, I have been watching you these past months. You see solutions that others miss. You act when others freeze. These are valuable qualities, even if others cannot recognize them. The next day brought a new tactical scenario. Amy's squad was assigned to capture a hostile space station using minimal force. The objective was to disable the station's weapons and capture its command center without causing excessive damage. Amy studied the station's layout during the briefing. She noticed that the ventilation system connected directly to the command center. A small team could crawl through the maintenance tunnels and reach the objective without fighting through heavily defended corridors. Squad leader, Amy said, raising her hand. I have a suggestion. Veltar looked annoyed. What is it, Rodriguez? Amy explained her plan. The other cadets listened with skeptical expressions. When she finished, Veltar shook his head. Too risky. We will use the standard approach. Frontal assault with covering fire. But sir, my way would avoid casualties entirely. Your way involves crawling through narrow tunnels like vermin. We are military officers, not maintenance workers. Amy bit her tongue and said nothing more. They executed Veltar's plan exactly as he ordered. It worked, but 3 cadets were injured in the fighting, and significant damage was done to the station's infrastructure. After the exercise, the instructor reviewed their performance. Acceptable execution of standard tactics, he said. However, I note that Cadet Rodriguez presented an alternative approach that would have achieved the objective with 0 casualties and minimal damage. Amy felt a small surge of satisfaction. Finally, someone had recognized her contribution, but Veltar's expression darkened. Sir, Cadet Rodriguez's plan violated established protocols for station assault. It was unprofessional and undignified. Nevertheless, it would have been effective, the instructor replied. Military officers must be able to adapt to unusual circumstances. That evening, Amy noticed Veltar talking quietly with Kixron and another cadet named Thokmar. Thokmar was a massive alien from the warrior planet Gorvani with thick gray skin and arms like tree trunks. He rarely spoke, but when he did, others listened. Amy tried to ignore them, but she caught fragments of their conversation as she passed by. Words like dangerous and eliminated and before she corrupts others. They are planning something, Carousel observed later that night. I can sense the emotional resonance of their thoughts. They feel threatened by your success. What can they do? Amy asked. My grades are excellent. I haven't broken any rules since the live fire incident. Perhaps they will try to create a situation where you appear to break rules. Amy considered this. You think they'll try to set me up? I think desperate beings do desperate things. The next morning, Amy was called to the medical center for what she was told was a routine health screening. The doctor, a tall alien with too many arms, ran several tests on her blood and nervous system. Everything appears normal, the doctor said, though I do note some unusual readings in your adrenal system. Are you experiencing any symptoms of stress? No more than usual, Amy replied. The doctor made notes on his data pad. I see here that you have been diagnosed with something called adrenal hyperresponse syndrome. Can you explain this condition? Amy shifted uncomfortably. It's a human condition. When we're under extreme stress, our bodies produce extra adrenaline. It makes us faster and stronger, but it can also make us act impulsively. Interesting. And this occurs involuntarily? Yes, it's an automatic response. Most humans have it to some degree. The doctor continued making notes. I will need to monitor this condition closely. Please report any episodes of unusual stress or aggressive behavior immediately. Amy left the medical center feeling uneasy. She had never mentioned her condition to anyone at the academy. How had they found out about it? Over the next few days, Amy noticed subtle changes in her routine. She was assigned to more stressful exercises than usual. Her meal times were moved to overlap with cadets who disliked her. Her sleep schedule was disrupted by emergency drills that seemed to happen only in her section of the dormitory. They are testing you, Carousel observed, pushing you toward your breaking point. Why? If you have an episode of this hyperresponse syndrome in front of witnesses, they can claim you are unstable and dangerous. Amy realized her friend was right. Someone had discovered her medical condition and was using it against her. Every day brought new sources of stress, designed to trigger her body's natural response. The culmination came during a particularly difficult combat simulation. Amy had been awake for 26 hours due to emergency training sessions. She had missed 2 meals because of scheduling conflicts. Her usual squad mates had been reassigned. Leaving her with cadets who openly showed their hostility, the simulation was designed to test individual combat skills. Each cadet would face multiple opponents in a series of one-on-one battles. Amy's opponents were all larger and stronger than her, and they fought with barely contained aggression. By the 4th battle, Amy could feel her body beginning to respond to the stress. Her heart rate increased, her muscles tensed. Her vision became sharper and more focused. She was approaching the edge of an adrenal episode. That's enough, she said to the instructor. I need to stop. Nonsense, the instructor replied. You have one more opponent. Her final opponent was Thokmar. The massive Gorvani warrior smiled coldly as he entered the combat area. Ready to show us what Deathworlders are really made of? He asked. Amy tried to center herself to push down the rising tide of adrenaline. But her body was already beginning to change. Her muscles felt stronger. Her reflexes were becoming faster. The familiar sensation of hyperresponse was building inside her. I forfeit, she said quickly. Coward, Thokmar laughed. Running away like a frightened animal? Other cadets began to whisper and point. Amy felt the weight of their stares and their judgment. The stress was becoming overwhelming. Please, she said to the instructor, I need to leave. The exercise is not complete, the instructor replied firmly. You will finish your assigned battles. Amy looked around the room at the hostile faces watching her. She could feel her control slipping away as her body prepared for the fight-or-flight response that had kept humans alive on dangerous worlds for thousands of years. Somewhere in the crowd, she saw Veltar watching with satisfaction. He thought he had won. He thought he had finally found a way to destroy her. Amy took a deep breath and stepped back into the combat circle. If they wanted to see what a Deathworlder could do, she would show them. But she would do it on her own terms, not theirs. Let's finish this, she said. Amy completed the combat simulation without losing control, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Her body was on edge, ready to trigger the hyperresponse at any moment. She needed to find a quiet place to calm down and center herself. After the session ended, Amy walked quickly toward her quarters. Other cadets stepped aside as she passed, whispering among themselves. She could hear fragments of their conversations, words like unstable and dangerous, following her down the corridor. "Amy, wait up!" Jake called from behind her. He jogged to catch up, his face showing concern. "Are you okay? You look like you were about to snap back there." "I'm fine," Amy said, though her hands were still shaking slightly. "I just need some time alone." "Maybe we should talk to someone about what's happening. This isn't normal training anymore." Amy stopped walking. "Who would we talk to? Commander Zekthara. He's already looking for reasons to expel me." "The other instructors? They all think humans are too violent for the academy." Jake didn't have an answer for that. They both knew the truth. Amy was alone in a system designed to see her fail. "Just give me some space," Amy said. "I'll be fine by tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. The next morning, Amy received an unusual message on her datapad. "Report to Training Facility 7 for special assessment. 800 hours. Come alone." Amy frowned. She had never heard of a special assessment, and Training Facility 7 was one of the smaller practice rooms used for individual exercises. Why would they want her to come alone? She considered asking Jake or Kirasol about it, but the message was marked as confidential. Breaking confidentiality rules would give the academy another reason to punish her. Amy arrived at Training Facility 7 exactly at 08. The corridor outside was empty, which seemed strange for a training area. She pressed her palm against the security scanner and the door slid open. Inside, the room was set up like a basic marksmanship range. Targets stood at various distances and weapon cases lined one wall. But instead of an instructor, Amy found 3 cadets waiting for her. Veltar stood in the center of the room, wearing his dress uniform instead of training gear. Kixron was positioned near the weapon cases, his yellow eyes watching Amy carefully. Thokmar loomed near the back wall, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "Cadet Rodriguez," Veltar said formally. "Thank you for coming." Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Something was very wrong. Where's the instructor? What kind of assessment is this? "We are conducting a stress evaluation," Veltar replied. Smoothly. "The Academy has concerns about your psychological stability. We need to determine if you can handle pressure without losing control." "I don't understand. Why isn't this being done by medical personnel?" Kixron stepped forward. "We volunteered to help. We know you better than the doctors do." Amy started to back toward the door. "I think there's been a mistake. I should check with..." The door slammed shut behind her. Amy spun around and pressed the control panel, but nothing happened. "The door was locked from the outside." "Don't worry," Veltar said. "This is just a precaution. We need to ensure accurate test conditions." Amy's heart began to beat faster. Her instincts were screaming that she was in danger, but she tried to stay calm. "Let me out. I want to speak with Commander Zekthara." "The commander authorized this test," Thokmar said in his deep voice. "He wants to know if Deathworlders can be trusted under pressure." Amy looked at the 3 cadets surrounding her. All of them had weapons attached to their belts. All of them were watching her with predatory eyes. "What kind of test?" she asked. Veltar smiled coldly. "A simple one. We're going to create a stressful situation and observe your reaction. If you remain calm and controlled, you pass. If you lose control and become violent, you fail. And what happens if I fail? You are removed from the academy permanently. Your entire species is banned from future applications." Amy felt the familiar surge of adrenaline beginning to build in her system. Her muscles tensed. Her senses became sharper. She was approaching the edge of hyperresponse exactly as they had planned. "I want to leave," she said firmly. "I'm afraid." "That's not possible," Veltar replied. "The test has already begun." Kixron moved to the weapon cases and selected an energy pistol. He checked its power setting and aimed it at Amy. "Phase 1. Can the subject remain calm when threatened?" Amy's training took over. She raised her hands and spoke in a level voice. "You don't want to do this. Put the weapon down and open the door. We can all walk away from this." "See how she tries to give orders?" Veltar said to the others. "Even Now, she cannot accept her place. Thokmar picked up a second weapon. Perhaps she needs more motivation. Amy backed against the far wall as both cadets aimed their weapons at her. Her body was flooding with adrenaline now. Her vision was becoming clearer. Her muscles were growing stronger. The hyperresponse was beginning whether she wanted it or not. Please, she said, just let me go. I won't report this. Phase 2. Veltar announced. Physical stress? Kixron fired his weapon. The energy beam struck Amy in the shoulder, sending pain shooting through her body. The weapons were set to incapacitate, not kill, but the pain was real and intense. Amy stumbled but remained standing. You're making a mistake? She said through gritted teeth. Are we? Veltar asked. Or are we preventing a dangerous animal from hurting innocent people? Thokmar fired next, hitting Amy in the leg. She dropped to one knee, her uniform smoking where the energy beam had struck. Look at her, Veltar said with satisfaction. Already she shows signs of losing control. Watch her eyes. Watch how her muscles tense. This is what Deathworlders become when threatened. Amy looked up at her attackers. Her vision was crystal clear now. She could see every detail of their faces, every movement of their bodies. Her hearing was so sharp she could hear their heartbeats. The hyper-response was in full effect. Last chance, she said, her voice now carrying a dangerous edge. Stop this now. Phase 3, Veltar announced. Maximum stress? All three cadets fired at once. Amy tried to dodge, but one beam caught her in the other shoulder while another grazed her side. She fell to the ground, her body screaming with pain. But instead of staying down, Amy began to rise. Her movements were fluid and controlled, like a predator preparing to strike. The pain was still there, but it seemed distant now, pushed aside by the flood of chemicals in her system. Impossible, Kixron whispered. She should be unconscious. Amy stood up slowly, her injured body moving with inhuman grace. You wanted to see what a Deathworlder looks like when threatened? She asked. Congratulations. Veltar took a step backward. The test is over. You failed to maintain control. No, Amy said, her voice deadly calm. The test is just beginning. She moved toward Kixron with speed that shocked all three cadets. Before he could react, she had disarmed him and thrown him across the room. He hit the wall hard and slumped. To the floor, unconscious, Thokmar, despite his size, tried to run. Amy caught him before he had taken 3 steps. Her human strength, enhanced by adrenaline, was more than enough to overpower the larger alien. She grabbed his weapon and crushed it in her bare hands before lifting him off the ground and throwing him into the weapon cases. Veltar was frantically trying to open the door. Help! He screamed into his communicator. Security, Emergency and Training Facility 7. Amy approached him slowly, her movements controlled despite the rage burning in her eyes. You wanted to create a stressful situation, she said. Mission accomplished. Stay back, Veltar warned, pointing his weapon at her. I'll shoot. You already did, Amy replied. 3 times my turn. She reached for the door controls that Veltar was blocking. He fired point blank at her chest, but Amy had already moved. Aside, the beam missed her by inches. Amy grabbed the door handle and pulled. The reinforced metal door was designed to withstand significant force, but Amy's hyper-response-enhanced strength was beyond the designer's expectations. She pulled harder, her muscles straining against the metal. The doorframe began to crack. Metal groaned under the pressure. Veltar watched in horror as Amy literally began to tear the door from its hinges. This is impossible, he whispered. No being is that strong. Amy looked at him over her shoulder. You're not dealing with no being, she said. You're dealing with a human. With a final surge of strength, Amy ripped the entire door from its frame and threw it aside. The heavy metal barrier crashed to the floor with a sound like thunder. Beyond the doorway, Amy could see security personnel running toward the training facility. Behind her, 3 cadets lay unconscious on the floor. Victims of their own prejudice and fear, Amy Rodriguez, the Deathworlder they had tried to destroy, stood in the wreckage of their carefully planned trap. Blood ran from her wounds, but her eyes were clear and focused. She had passed their test after all. just not in the way they had expected. Commander Zekthara arrived at Training Facility 7 with a team of security officers. They stopped in shock at the sight of the heavy metal door lying twisted on the corridor floor. The reinforced barrier was bent and cracked as if it had been torn apart by some massive machine. "What in the seven worlds happened here?" one of the security officers asked, through the destroyed doorway. They could see Amy Rodriguez standing in the center of the room. Her uniform was torn and burned in several places. Blood ran from wounds on her shoulder and leg. But she stood, straight and calm, her breathing steady despite the obvious pain. 3 unconscious cadets lay scattered around the room. Kixran was slumped against one wall. Thokmar was buried under a pile of broken weapon cases. Veltar lay near the destroyed door, his silver skin pale with shock. "Cadet Rodriguez," Commander Zekthara said carefully, "step away from the injured cadets." Amy looked at him with eyes that still held traces of the hyperresponse. "They attacked me, sir. 3 against 1. They locked me in and shot me with live weapons." "That's impossible," the commander replied. "This was supposed to be a routine marksmanship assessment. Check the security recordings." Amy said simply. One of the security officers was already scanning the room with his equipment. "Sir, I'm detecting energy weapon discharge. Multiple shots fired, and there's something else." He pointed his scanner at the doorframe. The metal was torn from the inside. The stress patterns indicate incredible force applied by hand. Commander Zekthara stared at the twisted metal. "No being in the galaxy has that kind of strength." "Humans do," Amy said quietly, "when we need to." Medical personnel arrived and began treating the injured cadets. Amy refused treatment until the others were stable, despite the obvious pain from her wounds. "I want a full investigation," Commander Zekthara ordered. "Interview all witnesses. Check every security recording. I want to know exactly what happened." Here. While the medical team worked, Amy sat on a broken piece of equipment and watched them care for her attackers. The hyperresponse was fading now, leaving her feeling drained and sore. But her mind was clear. Jake and Carasol arrived with a group of other cadets who had heard the commotion. Jake's face went white when he saw the destruction. "Amy, what did you do?" He whispered. "What I had to do," Amy replied. "They tried to frame me, make it look like I lost control and attacked them for no reason." Carasol examined the twisted door with her crystalline senses. "The metal tells a story," she said softly. "Great force applied with precision. Not wild violence, but controlled strength used for escape." Over the next hour, the truth began to emerge. Security recordings showed the 3 cadets arriving early to set up their trap. Audio recordings captured their conversation about creating a stress test to prove Amy was dangerous. The weapons they used were indeed set to incapacitate rather than stun, causing real injury. Most damning of all was Veltar's own communicator, which had recorded his voice saying Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 as they shot Amy. Commander Zekthara reviewed the evidence in his office while Amy waited in the medical center. Her wounds had been treated, but she knew her real fate was being decided by the Academy leadership. "This changes everything," Jake said as he sat beside her bed. "They can't blame you for defending yourself, can't they?" Amy asked. "I still destroyed Academy property. I still used violence against fellow cadets. After they shot you 3 times and locked you in a room," Carasol pointed out. "Any reasonable being would call that self-defense." Amy wasn't so sure. She had seen the fear in the security officers' eyes when they looked at the destroyed door. She had felt their unease around her even after the truth came out. To them, she was still a dangerous Deathworlder who had shown exactly how dangerous she could be. 2 days later, Amy was called before the Academy Review Board. The chamber was filled with instructors and administrators from a dozen different species. Commander Zekthara sat at the center table, his expression unreadable. "Cadet Rodriguez," he began, "this board has reviewed all evidence related to the incident in Training Facility 7. We have reached several conclusions." Amy stood at attention, preparing for the worst. "First, the attack upon you was planned and deliberate." Cadets Veltar, Kixron, and Thokmar acted without authorization, and in direct violation of Academy safety protocols. They have been expelled from the program and face criminal charges. Amy felt a moment of relief, but the commander wasn't finished. Second, your response to the attack was justified under Academy self-defense regulations. You were defending your life against armed attackers who had you trapped. Another pause. Amy waited for the however that she knew was coming. However, the level of force you displayed raises serious concerns about human capabilities that were not previously understood. There it was. Amy had saved herself, but in doing so, she had revealed just how dangerous humans could be when pushed to their limits. The question before this board, Commander Zekthara continued, is whether the Academy can safely train beings with such destructive potential. One of the other instructors, a tall blue alien with tentacles instead of arms, spoke up. The cadet tore a reinforced security door from its frame with her bare hands. She defeated 3 armed opponents while suffering from serious injuries. These capabilities exceed anything in our training protocols, which is exactly why we need humans in our military, another voice said. Amy turned in surprise. The speaker was Admiral Chender, the Academy's highest-ranking officer. The ancient alien rarely attended review hearings. Admiral, Commander Zekthara said respectfully, do you wish to address the board? Admiral Chender stood slowly, his age showing in every movement. I have been training military officers for 300 years, he said. I have seen cadets from every species in the galaxy. Most are competent, some are exceptional. But I have never seen anything like what Cadet Rodriguez displayed. Amy's heart sank. This was it, the final condemnation. She faced overwhelming odds, the Admiral continued. She was injured and trapped. Any rational being would have surrendered. Instead, she fought back with a determination that borders on the impossible. The Admiral walked toward Amy, his ancient eyes studying her carefully. Do you know what that tells me, Cadet? No, sir, Amy replied quietly. It tells me that when the galaxy faces its darkest hour, when all hope seems lost, humans will still be fighting. They will find a way to survive, to protect others, to win against impossible odds. The Admiral turned back to the board. The question is not whether humans are too dangerous for our Academy. The question is whether we are brave enough to train them properly. The room fell silent. Amy could hear her own heartbeat as the board members exchanged glances. The galaxy is vast and full of threats, Admiral Chender said. Some enemies cannot be defeated with protocol and precision. Sometimes you need a being who will tear a door off its hinges to save her friends. Sometimes you need a Deathworlder. Commander Zekthara nodded slowly. What do you recommend, Admiral? I recommend that we recognize Cadet Rodriguez for what she is. Not a dangerous animal to be controlled, but a valuable warrior to be properly trained. I recommend we learn from her instead of fearing her. The vote was unanimous. Amy would remain at the Academy, but under a new program designed specifically for Deathworlder species. She would graduate, and the Academy would actively recruit more humans for future classes. 6 months later, Amy Rodriguez stood on the graduation platform wearing the gold insignia of a lieutenant. Jake Thompson stood beside her, along with 12 other human cadets who had arrived after the new recruitment program began. In the audience, Carousel S crystalline form glowed with pride. Commander Zekthara, now Amy's mentor rather than her enemy, nodded approvingly. Admiral Chender watched from the reviewing stand with satisfaction. Amy looked out at the assembled crowd of alien dignitaries and fellow graduates. Many still viewed humans with caution, but now it was the respectful wariness given to valuable allies rather than the fear reserved for dangerous beasts. As she received her commission, Amy thought about the long journey that had brought her here. She had been shot, attacked, and nearly expelled. She had faced prejudice and hatred from those who should have been her teammates, but she had also discovered something important. Being from a death world wasn't a weakness to overcome. It was a strength to embrace. Humans were survivors not because they were violent, but because they refused to give up when others would surrender. The ceremony ended with the traditional oath of service. Amy spoke the ancient words along with her classmates, promising to protect the innocent and defend the galaxy against all threats, but she added her own silent promise as well. She would prove that humans deserved their place among the stars. She would show the galaxy that Deathworlders could be heroes too. And if anyone ever again tried to hurt her friends or her family, they would learn exactly why humans were called Deathworlders. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring.